All right, everyone, we should be live. Let's make sure that's actually the case. Over on Rumble, of course, probably is the case. A bunch of people waiting to view the live stream. We'll be having some fun today. In other news, I've decided to parse down the number of topics that I typically cover from 7 to 8 to 6 to 7 within these live streams. That's because I'm making an extra video every day. If you're not following me on some permutation of Rumble, BitChute, or Odyssey, you're not getting your full clank of the day. You're only getting a half clank, and that's really sad. We'll be talking about various news topics today. We have to talk about Isaac Herzog's crazy comments with regards to the Israeli war against Hamas and the fact that Gaza no longer really exists as an entity. It's basically collapsed into nothingness. We'll be talking about that and things related generally to the war that's going on over there. The Biden war, you could call it. And of course, if one person ever did anything wrong under Donald Trump, it was Trump's problem. So I figured that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I'm talking about Javier Milei. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's not Javier or Xavier. It's Javier, I believe, under the local pronunciation in Argentina. He's the front runner for the next president, actually, for the Argentinians. And of course, a prosecutor has launched a criminal case against him. We'll be talking about that. It certainly looks a lot like what they did to Jair Bolsonaro, Donald Trump, and half a dozen other people in recent times. Yeah, so we can briefly cover the New Zealand election, actually, as well. To 3-inch hippopotamus there. In brief, Ardern's party lost bigly. The problem is there is no actual populist party in New Zealand. It's basically a center-left movement replacing a hard-left movement. So that's basically all we have to say. We also have to talk about Loomer's opinion on Youngkin. I disagree with her. And I watch Laura Loomer, and I like some of her takes. But this one, I think, is unnecessary. I don't think that it's real. We'll be getting into that. Also, Mike Pence getting heckled when he was in New Hampshire. Some dude claiming that they were both gay and they should admit to it publicly and compare the size of their John Deeres, if you know what I'm saying. We've got various things to talk about. Some of it is humorous. Some of it, unfortunately, would be nothing more than grave humor, as in there are literally thousands of graves being dug right now in Gaza because people are being purged at the moment. But it's okay. The Western countries assure you that it's politically correct for them to die. Iman Donahue, if you want to know who rules over you, just give Mel Gibson a few cocktails. Oh, God. Yeah, Traveler, Uranium One. People have forgotten all about that. I haven't, but most people have. We'll be talking about all that. Yes, and also we can mention Ukraine, although you'll notice that that's been knocked out of the news cycle recently. Supposedly Russia, big nuclear power, lots of manpower, tanks and missiles and everything else, was endangering Western democracy, but all of a sudden you hear nothing about them. I wonder why that could possibly be. We'll also talk about Iran. They're making threats with regards to the war currently going on in Gaza and saying, if Hezbollah gets involved, fuck you. Hezbollah is involved, at least to a limited degree. So we'll talk about that as well. And Ecuador, that's our final news story of the day. Ecuador forsaking the far left in favor of the just regular left, or what passes as being a conservative movement within a nation like Ecuador. So we got all sorts of stuff to talk about. I would love to talk about Poland, by the way, but I have a limited number of slots. Otherwise, I end up having to truncate everything, and I prefer long-form rants as opposed to very pithy things, unless I'm making a short. Apparently, I'm going to have to start doing that. I'm going to have to start making 2 or 3 shorts a day, plus the MRE videos, plus the normal videos, plus the live streams, plus the editing, plus the writing, plus the baby care, plus the chores, and everything else that I do. I like to keep active, but my God, I like to have at least 1 hour out of the day to play like Napoleon Total War or something like that. By the way, last night, winning an epic victory. It was a 2-on-1. I had 2 groups of enemies, both Prussian, facing off against me by the Spanish lakeside, and I managed just barely to defeat them with 1 group of British, and it was not easy. because you have 3 different conduits for the enemies to come across, and you have to sort of guess where they're going to go. And it requires a lot of howitzers, actually, too. Man, that's a fun game. I wish that they would release a new version of it, like the actual Napoleon Total War, but I want more map size, more units, more actual maps themselves. And for some reason, if you're doing player v player, there are about a dozen maps that aren't available if you're doing player v computer. They should not have done that, in my opinion. Age of Empires is fun. Empire Earth. I like Victoria too. I briefly perused Victoria 3, but it looks like the problem is that it's not military oriented. If I start out as a nation, I tend to be a warmonger when I'm playing a strategy game. I tend to try to hammer the enemy as much as possible and just rip apart everything along my border. I don't want to play as a diplomat. I want to destroy things in my path. It's the exact opposite of how I am in real life because it's a fucking video game. Deus Flex, since the ADL head went crying on MSNBC and got them to shut down their pro-Palestinian hosts, when do you think the Uniparty will initiate mass deplatforming of progressive content creators as you predicted? I think that the leftoid content creators are more careful in their commentary, and they're not led by a corporation. Well, I mean, they might be under corporate contract and lose money, but they play by the TOS more than an MSNBC host is likely to do. MSNBC host is like, I pull in 500,000 viewers in my time slot. I'm untouchable. They don't really understand how reality works. Alan Smithy, good morning from Roanoke, Gaza. Come get your water pipes converted to munitions instead of infrastructure. Free shipping with code STICKS. Oh, God. No, again, grave humor. Tom Pollins, 787. Sticks, welcome back. Can you shout out my sister, Kim? She lost her fiance on Wednesday. Heart attack that turned into a torn aorta. Couldn't stop bleeding. 35. Great man. Always helped others. Thanks. My condolences. And yes, a shout out to his sister, Kim. And that's rather sad. 35. That's pretty, I mean, that's how old I am. Jesus. Yeah. Thinking about mortality, actually, when I was back in Rutland, I made out my will, actually. Figured, you know, I want to make sure that everything is cut and dry if I keel over at some point. Georgie Georgiev, East EU guy here. Tim Pool and others I follow are totally against sending Ukraine weapons and help. Well, here we are doing what we can, but we need the U.S. For context, I'm a right-wing conservative, and no, we are not controlled by Russia. The opposite. Yeah, here's the thing. I don't support war. I never have, and I never will. You can look back through all of my materials. I've never supported a war in my entire life. That's because most wars are unjustified. And the end result is, even if they're justified, usually civilians are the ones that suffer. I think that people should be well armed. They should be able to express and speak freely. They should be able to protest freely. Leave people alone. Go about your business. Let's restore free trade across the world. We don't need to fight each other. There's plenty of land, there's plenty of resources, and we can work things out in other senses, individually and diplomatically. We don't need to slaughter one another for no reason. Call me naive, but I think that would be a better world. And it ain't some fucking Yoko Ono commie world either. I'm talking about free trade and unbridled capitalism, actually. I think that that's a better idea than, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. Look at what we've got right now. Is the world safer? Is it is it more free of war because of the rise of socialism and globalist structures? No? Well, then we should forsake them. Sir Link, we may be going to war. Things got real. Army and Marines enlist ads now flipped back to showing strong white males instead of diversity. Yeah, they definitely want more manpower. We'll see if that works for them. I definitely wouldn't sign up for the military right now. I don't want to go and die for some foreign nation for absolutely no reason. Neither should you. Journey, trials, and joy. What's the likelihood of the escalating to world war? I think both Russia and China want Iran to get involved to draw the USA into a war. I don't think that is likely to happen. I think it's more likely to be a regional conflict. But again, even a regional conflict could take hundreds of thousands of lives. So it's not something that people should be fucking desiring. I see a lot of people, they're like, oh, kill them all. Yeah, bomb everyone. Bomb the Jewish people, bomb the Islamic people, subhumans, barbarians, and stuff like that. A lot of these people are kids. And so I don't know. I'm not going to join people on the outrage parade. I like to have a little bit of consistency in my beliefs. I would prefer people to be left alone. I say arm them all and let God sort it out. You know, they're various gods under one Godhead. Killian P. Lice. Sticks, have you heard of a game called Kenshi? It's a post-apocalyptic indie game where you can build a base in a world where every other faction is out to get you. Heard of it. It looked good, but I have not played it. Georgie Georgiev, war breeds hate. I lost a good friend in Ukraine. His favorite game was The Witcher 3. Another guy lost a leg. This is when it gets personal. East EU is rearming, and I know that it benefits the rich, but we have no choice. Oh, I have no problem with like the Polish or the Hungarians rearming. If anything, people in Eastern Europe have more of a reason than most to make sure that they're well armed. I just think that most of those munitions should be in the hands of private civilians instead of militaries, which, of course, the militaries are run by centralized governments, which might situationally decide to abandon them and let them get slaughtered for a political reason. Well, individual citizens don't think that way. The whole world should be one giant militia. Gigantic militia with huge amounts of ammo, enormous numbers of guns and body armor, fucking private tanks and everything else. It'd be a more peaceful world, ironically. Sir Link, for the record, I don't support Israel or Palestine. It isn't our problem. I want to return to the Monroe Doctrine, no matter what sad pictures they show. You could do worse. Yeah, basically the United States says keep out of the Americas, and you do you. Old world stays old world. Go ahead and, fuck each other because you always have. Fallen Hero 4567 sent $1. No comment. Thank you. 2B Sticks. How do you avoid black pill and permastone? Permastone. Well, I don't use any drugs. As far as black pilling, I just mind my own business and try to work on my own shit. And I find that is uplifting. One thing, it makes me money. Another thing, it takes up time that could be used. I mean, I could sit there worrying and crying for 2 hours, or I could edit books, and I find that to be uplifting. Orwell's Goon. My brother and I see contrast from Ukraine to Gaza, red-pilling a bunch of normies. I suspect people are seeing the massive disinfo campaign on both sides. Some of them, yeah. Throne Blown. If you like warmongering only in your 4X strategy games, check out Warhammer 40k, Gladius Relics of War. Diplomacy isn't even an option because in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. I don't mind diplomacy. I just want to bend it to my will and use it to influence others around me in hopes of having more allies when I go and launch a war against people. That's why I liked Victoria too. You could do stuff like that. That was fun. Got to start a new game at some point. But I got to get rid of the add-ons because when you have Heart of Darkness and I can't remember what the other one was, it changes the gameplay and it makes it more diplomacy-oriented in a shitty way. I liked, what was it? The build was 1.2 or 3 or something like that. They had fixed some of the drastic economic problems which were present in the original release of the game, but it was without the add-ons. And so as the original game... with all of its bizarre convolutions, like sometimes it'd be 1900, China would become the world power. And it was really, really funny. You would see all sorts of crazy shit. Nations would randomly form when other nations fell by the wayside. You'd see the United States would all of a sudden become a communist nation or something like that. It was very, very fun. And I really wish I could get that original build, like the last one before they released the add-ons, just for vanilla Victoria 2. Without the add-ons. If somebody can get me a working download for that, I would definitely like to play that again because unfortunately I don't have the original files anymore. Georgie Georgiev. Here, WEPs are forbidden for civilians. Well, we found a way. We get hunting licenses and we have 2 to 3 hunting guns per family. Better than nothing. Vincent, all UK papers covered the 40 babies fake story. Yes, we remember 40 beheaded dead babies. It turns out that wasn't actually the case, which is good. I mean, less dead babies is not a bad thing now, is it? Anyway, we're going to get into some news. Israeli president says there are no innocent civilians in Gaza. Yes, this is Isaac Herzog. As Israel engages in a massive air campaign ahead of an anticipated full-scale ground invasion of the Gaza Strip, Israeli President Isaac Herzog said on Friday all citizens of Gaza are responsible for the attack Hamas perpetrated in Israel last weekend that left over 1,200 people dead. This is a HuffPo article. That is not a verbatim recapture of exactly what he meant, but it's close enough whereby fucking the left-wing legacy media, which tends towards pro-Hamas sentiment more than anything else, fundamentally is correct about what he said. It is an entire nation out there that is responsible, Herzog said at a press conference on Friday. It is not true, this rhetoric about civilians not being aware and not involved. It is absolutely not true. They could have risen up. They could have fought against that evil regime which took over Gaza in a coup d'etat. Now, let's ask something. If Hamas is really so butcherous that they're beheading babies, gunning people down at concerts and so forth, and they deny the ability of self-defense to the average person in Gaza, by the way, the average Gazan does not own a rifle unless they're aligned at least loosely with Hamas. How are the people there, which are 50% children, how are they supposed to rise up against Hamas? They wouldn't have the numbers to do so. They'd get completely curb stomped. They'd get wiped off the face of the earth. I find Isaac Herzog's comments to be, at the very least, unhelpful. And you'd think that, like, even the Israeli press would be like, what the fuck is our president talking about? But they're not really doing that. They're just countermanding it, silently shelve the story, and then put out the Knesset's message, which is, no, we're not going to target any civilians or anything like that. We're here for Hamas, basically. I find that interesting. That's number one. And number two, when you look at the actual pragmatic fallout in Gaza, Gaza is effectively a non-entity. It no longer exists. The northern part of it, those areas which have not been completely evacuated, are simply controlled by Hamas. Those areas which are, they've been probably by now booby-trapped. I'm sure there are a million IEDs already ready to go up there. If Israel decides to mount a ground invasion, they're going to take heavy casualties. It won't stop them, but it will definitely grind them down. And the unfortunate part is that all of this was avoidable if Western leadership had actually been competent and sane, because Israel is directly under the U.S. sphere. But we don't have that right now. We have Joe Biden leading things. Joe Biden's response was to wait 48 hours and then make a speech about it that sounded exactly like any other politician would make anyway. Well, you're our greatest ally. We've got your back. Just, use some caution. Blinken coming out 24 hours later and saying the exact same thing. Well, we're at the end of our rope with regards to this Ukraine stuff. We're pivoting basically to the Middle East. We know we haven't had a war there in a half a decade, mainly because we had sane and competent leadership before. But now we mean business, but hold back. Don't actually destroy Hamas, because then you might win. And if you win, there's no more money to be made by a Raytheon or a Boeing. And so I find the whole thing, it's hysterical on one end because people should see through it. On the other end, it's desperately sad because it's there's a bunch of fucking civilians dying at this point. LS420 Stoner. May I get a shout out for my adorably short friends, Bird and Sam? Also, just for grins, what are your thoughts on alt history fiction? Like, what if Operation Eagle Claw was successful, for example? I've seen some alt history sort of stuff. It can be interesting, although it lacks convolution because, of course, anything can and does happen. But yeah, a shout out for Bird and Sam. I don't know who you are, but apparently you're very short, and this is considered humorous. Take it to the bank. It's considered funny. Mark Guidetti. Arab terrorists from Gaza murdered my elderly neighbor, Leon Klinghoffer from Long Branch, New Jersey, back in the 80s. I don't forget or forgive. Yeah, keeping in mind, of course, that some random person whose family is from Palestine is probably not a Hamas member. Just sort of like the average person from Israel that transplants to the U.S., they're not an IDF sympathizer, but that nuance is always lost in war. In fact, that's the first nuance lost. You have to group people together in homogenous sort of compilations. You can't take into consideration their individual existence. Lord of the Waffle House. Sticks, can you shout out to my nieces Stella and Evelyn? My little sister just had her second last night. It's good to celebrate life, especially in times like the current. I'm now a double funkle. Yeah, shout out to Stella and Evelyn. Congratulations for existing. May we all enjoy more peace than millions of people currently are. Because a bunch of fucking retards out there that just want to bomb each other. And that's really the way that I look at it. Again, I'm not Team Palestine. I'm not Team Israel. I'm Team America. I just want our own country to be safe. And while I think that it's terrible that people in other parts of the world bomb each other and stab each other and shoot each other and shit like that, I'm not willing to hazard the livelihood of my own fellow citizens on behalf of any other group in the world. And if that makes me selfish or short-sighted or naive or something like that, I don't really care. Mojo Hansen, left-wing government got destroyed in New Zealand elections, lol. Yes, replaced by a center-left government, because there is no such thing as populism in many parts of the world. The Patriot Cairo, expect oil embargoes against the USA and the West. That is possible. We may see another repeat of the 70s. It's entirely possible. Huns with guns. Someone tell Razorfist to unblock me on Twitter. Somebody else can do that. I don't control who he blocks or does not block myself. Wasted Bonehead. Good morning from the grave. The zombie has woken up, of course. Yeah, why can't the United States just guard its border, not do the world policing thing, withdraw the foreign aid bullshit, and we should make sure that our own public is capable of paying the rent, capable of doing the things that they want to do, defending themselves, making a living. I think that that should be the focus of the government of every nation, and globalism really needs to pass by the wayside. It hasn't made people safer or more wealthy, except for the 1%ers. For everyone else, it makes more sense to revert more to a nation-state model. Our nations can trade and travel and speak with one another. We got the internet now. We're capable of talking with one another. Sometimes that means ribbing one another. Most of the time, it means just having conversations and stuff like that. We're capable of getting along in peace. The people of the world are capable of doing that. We don't need governments to manage that for us. If anything, they're the ones that cause the wars. It's not some random person. It's not some random redneck in a trailer in Alabama that caused a war in the Middle East by calling someone the N-word. It was a government that did that. Josie, I heard you mentioned you are a fan of Victoria 2 Build. I believe if you purchased it on Steam, there's a setting that allows you to choose which version of the release you play like you want. Yeah, I couldn't get that to work, actually. I can go back through it. Politics chick. Support for Sticks. I respect you sticking to your principles, and always will. Never met a war that I didn't dislike. I am the opposite of John McCain. Aussie's Robots, Morning Sticks and Clanksters. What do you think of Newsom signing $20 hourly for fast food workers in California? Their state, if they want to continue to live there and suffer under Gavin Newsom's so-called leadership, then it's up to them. The Great Scalzini, seeing the left complain about collective punishment is peak hypocrisy, given any tragedy in police encounter is met with blame, gun owners, and whitey. Yeah, meanwhile, there are people like me who look askance at both. I don't think that there should be over-policing, and certainly that people that are gun owners shouldn't be harassed by the government. At the same time, I don't believe in collective punishment towards Gaza or towards Israel. I want people to leave each other alone. Is that fucking too much to ask? It's like when I'm on my property, like in Rutland or something. All I want to do is farm beans and leeks and shit like that. You know, why should I have to go to bed at night worrying about the vague possibility of someone fucking with me? Nobody in the world should have to live that kind of lifestyle. Deus Flex. The Israelis were handed the largest global sympathy since 9/11, and they're pissing it all away. Just listen to their ambassador in the UK compare the campaign to the bombing of Dresden, not helping their case as much as they think. Yeah, strategically speaking, Israel is already overstretching. That is one criticism that can be fairly levied. People are going to quickly forget about Hamas and their incursions and the dead babies and stuff like that when they see tens of thousands of dead Gazan civilians. Lev Polyakov, good morning, Sticks. What were you up to in Rutland? Also, how's the new house search going? Going pretty well. I was doing various things, meeting with my family, doing a shit ton of work and other things as well. I have no choice. I'm a busy man. Wouldn't have it any other way, by the way. I'd rather wear out than rust out. Politics chick. Oh, yeah, I already read that one. You don't get a twofer. Next news story. Yes, Javier Milei is currently running for the presidency in Argentina. He is the kind of populist, kind of vaguely libertarian in some cases candidate. Sort of like an old guard conservative, like imagine Ted Cruz or something like that. So you've got someone who, as far as the US equivalent, because I know that like 70-80% of the people watching are in the US, he's not really a full-on populist, or he's not like a Rand Paul, but he's a huge improvement over the leftoids that are currently governing things. It's about as close in Latin America as you're going to possibly get to sane governance. And I'm just going to read some of this verbatim because this is totally coincidental timing. Prosecutor files case against Argentina's frontrunner Javier Milei days before presidential election. Where does this fucking sound familiar? Shades of Donald Trump. A prosecutor has launched a criminal case against Argentina's frontrunner in this month's presidential elections, accusing Javier Milei of deliberately causing a sharp drop in the Argentine currency when he encouraged citizens not to save in pesos. Yes, he wants to replace the peso with a currency pegged directly to the US dollar, because the US dollar is more stable than the peso is. Buenos Aires, Argentina. And then this is just about the prosecutor. Milei denounced the move as political persecution just days ahead of the October 22nd polling. Wow. An October surprise from a leftoid prosecutor involving a judge, by the way, who has a hit or miss track record. You can look up her name if you want to, with regards to decision making. It's like, well, it's not terrible, but it tends to be kind of pro-establishmentarian. And that's probably the reason for this. Basically, prevent him from winning because he'll probably win in the actual vote. And they're terrified of him. The same way they were terrified of Bolsonaro, so they fucked with that election. Terrified of Trump, so they fucked with that election. And they're fucking with the next election, too. Trump is definitely the one that bothers them the most, but I think that Javier Milei there definitely fucks with them enough so that they're trying to knock him out of the way through judicial means because they can't beat him at the ballot box. My hope is he wins. My hope is that he turns around, he goes hardline and doesn't pussyfoot around with it, but immediately sacks the prosecutor, immediately puts him in jail or something like that. At this point, there's no choice but for people who are more liberty and populist minded to play hardball. And coming from me, by the way, that's definitely an escalation because the alternative is just you perpetually lose because you get abused and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm saying to the Argentinian people, you should vote Milei. That's number one. You can expect some shenanigans at the polls. Number two, if he's elected, you should encourage him to go after the judicial body that's attempting to do this. Restore your country. You pulled away from socialism for some time. Things were going well. The socialists got back in there, as they have now. And now you might go in the other direction. It would be, in my opinion, a good thing. Isn't it a little bit beyond the pale, though, that be a week before your election, all of a sudden charges that stem from something that happened quite some time ago are launched? Well, we've seen this in the United States, so don't go down that dark path. Just take control of your country, and that's what you should be doing. Little bit coincidental timing there now, isn't it? As usual, it's always a coincidence, even when it happens all over the world over and over again. The Agal faces, Israel and Palestine war no, sticks Fumo plush when? Never. The Patriot Cairo, relations between Israel and surrounding regions will never improve. There is a religious war of exterminationism. Jew hatred through history is unique. No, I think that hatred of people other than oneself tends to be unique. It wasn't a Jewish state until fairly recently. And actually, Palestine doesn't appear to have great relations with its neighbors either, considering none of those nations are willing to host a couple of million people to keep them from being bombed by the IDF. There's a lot more nuance than most people believe in that region. 87 Sparker, I just got my shipment of some of your books. 104 so far. Keep making more. I'm actually working on one right now about historic ghost hunters. It's a skeptical work. It talks about some notorious hauntings throughout history and how it's observed that there might have been shenanigans involving those. Interesting work. I'm having fun editing it. Mopey Hornet. Is the regional conflict in Israel putting more weight on China to invade Taiwan? No, that's one thing that I would not believe is the case. Of course, Taiwan is an island with a significant military. It's a little bit different from Palestine. Il Sarto. If the Israel-Palestinian conflict could be understood just a second, there's a ring at the door. All right, everyone, I actually have to go because the dude is here for the washing machine, which is something that my wife set up. It's on the fritz. It has some sort of error or something. So I'm going to have to look into that. I will probably get to a couple of the other news stories tomorrow or maybe the day after. I'll pop them in. I'll do exactly what I can. But yes, we made it a half an hour here. So I'll be back. That's about all. Peace out.